So when it comes to performance marks, clients tend to be in various levels of camps when it comes to performance. Some are seeing really good growth, some are seeing plateaued growth, some are costs going up, ROAS is going down, and there's a varying landscape there with Pmax. A lot of the questions I get from clients is, are we getting the best value from the spend? Pmax, when it first came onto the scene, had a relatively small adoption rate, but high success for that small adoption. And then it just seems to be pushed dramatically through the time it's been live. Agencies want to push it because it's low maintenance, and also Google's providing a little bit of pressure there to get adoption rate of automated technology and basically automatic recommendations. So there's a big drive from all areas to get clients over to Pmax. Then you've got the Google Ads agents who are kind of calling clients trying to get them onto Pmax where possible. And there's a lot of clients growing now of an appetite to move away from Pmax, but they're unsure how to do it. So I just want to run through kind of what Pmax is and what the downsides are, then ultimately how we can create a PPC stack which rivals Pmax and should give you the best ROI outside of Pmax. So just worth noting, I'm not anti Pmax, but for some clients, it's just not a good fit. There's just lack of control in too many areas, and there's so much better way of running PPC for these particular clients. Some aren't comfortable with just kind of updating assets and budgets and then nothing else. So it's basically just keep increasing the budgets, and that's kind of the only influencing factor. So I can see why there's a bit of disarray now with performance marks. And when you get a little bit of manual control back, it can have a huge impact on the revenue and obviously ROAS as well, return on ad spend. So PMAX is essentially a goal-based campaign which sells all advertisers all inventory based on the objective of that particular campaign. So you'll naturally get display and you'll naturally get search as part of that. So Google will take absolutely all inventory and then try and get business through to your site. They also use quite a broad spectrum of targeting. So they'll use keywords which are very loose and obviously learn over time and gradually kind of rein that in based on the objectives that you may set on the campaign level. So there's various levels of success. I see a lot of clients, most clients don't have a huge success on display, and it's more search orientated. But with PMAX, you're being forced to adopt channels which might not give you the best performance overall as well. So broad match keywords, relatively broad match, and then you're getting all of Google's inventory, very little control. You're effectively just putting your money into Google, and Google's trying to generate business for you with that campaign. There are some tools you could use. You can segment new clients with existing clients. You can create dedicated asset groups, and how you create the campaigns as well could be a bit more modulated. But overall, I think there's much better ways of managing PPC for some clients outside of PMAX. So what do you lose with PMAX? You essentially have brand dilution in a lot of areas where a PMAX campaign will naturally go to keywords which drive the biggest revenue, and that typically is brand. So you probably get some cross-contamination with people searching your brand, and you may notice that your other dedicated brand campaigns are taking a bit of a hit because some of the revenue is now being funneled over into PMAX as well. So this could actually inflate the revenue that PMAX is generating because it's gone after brand terms which would have converted probably anyway as well. So one thing you've got to consider is brand is normally included within PMAX because it will go towards the low friction, high revenue keywords, and brand's always a candidate for that. Keyword negatives. So it's very difficult to add negative keywords into PMAX. So you've got to go through a bit of a form process, and it naturally gravitates towards brand as well. So it'll go after the easy low win is there as well. Cannibalization is one that a lot of people don't really understand how detrimental it is, but PMAX seems to have the priority order over the other campaign types. So what it can do is it'll trigger when it believes it's going to get the conversion as part of the objectives, and then when it deems not to trigger because it doesn't believe it's going to get the conversion, normally another campaign type will activate. So if you've got a search campaign around brand, Pmax will have a lion's share on the best signals. What's left will go to your search campaign. So it actually looks like your search campaign isn't performing particularly well. All it is Pmax is getting a preferential exposure against the other search campaign. So it seems that Pmax will always get the right of way over other search campaigns, which can cause you a lot of issues, which I'll come into in a little bit. Another thing as well is unique ads per stage. So one feature you can have within Pmax is, with most campaign types, you can set a budget for new customers and a budget for existing customers, albeit the assets are relatively static. When you have manual control and manual campaigns, you can effectively create campaigns based on where that user's at. So I might do a dedicated campaign for people who've built a basket and left, overly bid to get them back onto the site. Or it might be a case where they've been on once and then return it back later, they're still searching. Perhaps change the value propositions in the ad copy or whatever that may be. So we can change things like, if they're based in Newcastle, we can change the ad to have the word Newcastle in to help build locality and things like that as well. Which you lose with Pmax. You essentially hand in the full campaign over for Google to basically run with what they think's best. So you do lose that. Another thing which I think is going to surface quite prominently is GA4 migration, where there's actually a huge dilution of data from GA4 to what we had with the old Google Analytics. So the target is naturally going to be less effective than what it was with UA, I think, in my opinion. So GA4, I think, has less kind of transactional data than what UA would have due to people being able to opt out. So there's basically going to be a dilution of data, low control, and I think it's going to get much more expensive as we get into July. And advertisers, I think, is going to get less relevant traffic, which will increase spend and obviously change the dynamics of ROAS as well. So I'm anticipating a big rollback of Pmax in July, which brings up the next page of how to do that. And yeah, actually, there's a lot of pitfalls you can do with this, where first thing you need to do is wind down Pmax completely across the account typically. And the reason I say that is, if you go back to the cannibalization point, where if you run a Pmax campaign, it's going to always be prioritized over the other search campaigns, in my opinion, especially with shopping and things like that. So Pmax is going to see the search, make a decision to show, because it believes it's going to get the conversion. So then it'll have prominence there. If it believes it's not going to convert, it won't show, but then another campaign will pick that visibility up as well. So campaigns outside of Pmax are always going to be secondary, and it'll never give you true performance. So completely wind down Pmax, but identify basically the keywords and the insights, basically anything that's driving revenue through Pmax, replicate into this new campaign structure. So actually Pmax in its entirety, I think, is a combination of loads of different tech, and we can grab the tech which is going to give us the best ROAS, build that out, and that should mitigate some of the inefficiencies of Pmax. So one of the things that I always start with, typically, this is a standard e-commerce client, is DSA search ads. So I'd have them quite strict kind of criteria around certain product ranges, categories, or certain pages. Don't put blog posts or whatever in there as well. So I'd have a DSA for search, and I'd also have like a dedicated search campaign for the flagship terms. So we get that, capture that impression share, and over time we'll build the negatives up, bit adjustments, and a bit of manual control in there as well. So the DSAs look really strong, and then the audiences, we can build them out as well. So if you wanted to do search campaigns for new clients who've never been on the site before, or existing clients, geographic clients, people build the basket on the left, you've got that flexibility to do so. So that DSA search, really good ones. You can also use target ROAS and target CPA, which is similar tech to what you have in Pmax, exactly the same tech, I think. And what I'd recommend doing here is set the standard low on the target. So ROAS to CPA is at a very low threshold, and then incrementally increase it over the next kind of 2 or 3 weeks. And what that'll do is it'll give you a really low benchmark so the campaign can go after everything, and then it'll tighten up over time. So maybe set the ROAS as like, I don't know, 180% and then build your way up to 300% as time goes on. But you could be able to look at the keywords, see what is attracting, especially with the DSA, and then you should get like a hit list of keywords where you can really kind of go after it as well, where you always want to show. And then the next thing is around Google Shopping. Is I'm seeing a lot of success with manual shopping campaigns. It's really bizarre. So one of the things I'd always do is take the feed and optimize it. So there's a couple of providers that I use to optimize the feed. So get the feed in tip-top condition, and then basically set up manual custom labels, for example. So high price point items, making sure that they're suppressed, and however you structure the campaign, you might have high, mid, low pricing, or you could have bestsellers is a high priority shopping campaign and the rest is low. But it's really back to basics with shopping. As long as you've got a really good feed, you're taking steps to optimize that, make sure the reviews are coming out, using Merchant Center correctly, GTINs, OEN numbers, all that kind of good stuff. So maximum success from a feed perspective, and then incrementally build out ROAS and CPA as well. Keep an eye on attribution as well, because Pmax can sometimes help with attribution, especially with display if it builds up brand awareness. But brand awareness doesn't usually mean profitability either. So keep an eye on attribution, just see how the dynamic changes between search and PPC and global performance as well. So keep that in the back of your mind as well. And another thing as well is keep up actions that are like for like with Pmax. So what you might have done in the past is updated audience lists for Pmax because it's a signal requirement. So just make sure you're doing the same with the new campaigns. So you can create like a shared audience list of existing clients, and it's the same tech. So the outcomes, what I think it would generate here is basically Pmax tech for search and shopping, without the inefficient spend around display or Gmail ads or discovery, which typically don't bring a strong return on investment. So the good thing is test it. They'll give it a trial run and live and die by the pounds and pence. Give it a fair crack at the whip on the new manual structure. It will require more effort to manage, but if it generates more revenue, it's more sustainable, gives you more control, then definitely worth at least considering. Just ensure Pmax isn't live on the account, and then that way you can't have it cannibalizing the search campaigns or the shopper campaigns that you guys are running as well. So really interesting time. It's good to see how Pmax will kind of develop over time, especially with GA4, because that's, as I said before, that's the guiding light. If Pmax is GA4 is using that data, and that data has become less integral or less accurate due to GDPR, then obviously the landscape is changing with search as well, which I've done another video on, which I'll try and link somewhere as well, so you've got it. So yeah, it's an interesting time, and as with anything with PPC, don't get fixated on Pmax as the way forward. Don't get fixated on manual as the way forward. Test everything. That's the main thing, and keep your assets up to date. Or look at word copy and all that kind of stuff, and just kind of keep moving it forward and live by the data. So hopefully you found that useful. Pmax is definitely something that once you're kind of in that ecosystem, very challenging to get out of. Or when you do try and get out of it, you've got this cannibalization that is absolutely eradicating performance on the stuff that you're testing it with. And then you have things like budget modularization, where you could spend like 200% of Pmax budget in a day, or you could spend like 10% of it based on that kind of signal insight as well. So test, that's the main thing, and give it a good 3 to 4 weeks potentially there on the new manual campaign to see if you can really gauge performance, because I think Pmax is going to be a rough road if that's the only kind of source of PPC revenue at this stage. Another thing as well, never take it off the table, is if Pmax becomes unprofitable, there are other providers like Meta or social PPC which can, if that gets a better return, diversify that budget wherever you need to. It sounds really strange to say that from a PPC perspective, but just seeing what's coming through Google at the minute has definitely opened my eyes that for a lot of businesses it has to be ROI and not just vanity of using Google Ads. There's other providers out there that might be able to get a better return. Bing Ads is doing quite well at the minute for a lot of clients. So yeah, it's definitely a dynamic time at the minute.